again.
Hi,
We're back for part 2. So Marisa, I will just get you, because people might actually listen to part 2 and either not listen to part 1, go back and listen to part 1, but they might not listen to part 1 first. So I'll get you to do your quick intro again, if you wouldn't mind, just so people know who I have the pleasure of talking with right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Marisa, and I'm a playful parenting coach, yoga teacher, and board certified genetic counselor. I work with parents and children who are feeling mentally and physically exhausted from trying to get it all done. And they know that they want more family time. They know that things are out of alignment, but they're not sure how to connect in a way that's meaningful and enjoyable for everyone. So I help them have those difficult conversations and connect with their values and who they are meant to be and who they want to be, so that they can stop shitting all over themselves and start to make decisions that feel more in alignment and put the puzzle pieces of life together so they can create more joy and ease as a family.
And you are also one of the people who are helping me with my book. So we're referring to that today. And it will be out probably around the time this podcast is, maybe even before. I'm excited. And what you're saying to me, have you read my, did I call it the paradox of everything was a paradox when I first wrote the book? And then the balance, I call it the balance myth now. Have you got to that part yet?
I don't think I've gotten to that part yet.
No. Okay. Because to me, what you're saying, without getting it all done, to me, the biggest thing you're talking about is what I think a lot of people call balance. Another way of saying it is feeling grounded.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest things I talk about the myth of balance, I'm not going to read it. I'm going to try and remember. It's a long book. I can't memorize everything. But to me, the balance myth is that people will feel balanced when they get their to-do list done.
Yes. Yeah.
And to me, the main thing about that is balance isn't the result of an action. Balance is a feeling.
Yes. So I love this as a yoga teacher, because one of the things, right, and I specialize in working with kids, and I work with a lot of kids who are on the spectrum. And so one of the things that they often can struggle with is balance, in a physical sense, right?
Okay.
Right. Like they can struggle with balance in a lot of different ways, but in the yoga like world, they can struggle with balance. And especially the ones that I work with who have hyperactive tendencies, right? So like, it's just about being able to stand still long enough to hold their balance. Okay. And one of the things that we talk about is that balance doesn't mean standing completely still. Like our muscles are not still in that moment when we're in tree pose. There are these little twitches that are happening as you're, start to lean to one side, and then you make that correction, and then you made the correction too much, or lean to the other side. And so we'll do this exercise where like I have, the yoga mat, and then I have a pad that they stand on. And so there's also like a different support that they're standing on for balance. They can hold onto the wall, not like that kind of stuff. And it's such a fun, when it started, it was just really about, teaching kids how to hold tree pose, because I was a new yoga teacher and I was like, this is the pose that I was taught to teach you. Yeah. But what it has taught me reminded me is that balance really isn't about like finding that still spot. Mm-hmm. It's about accepting or recognizing or observing those tiny shifts that are keeping you, from falling over, that are just kind of, you're wiggling back and forth a little bit, and you're making those adjustments, and they're happening subconsciously within your body and so, yeah, I love what you're saying about, the balance myth, because the to-do list is never going to get shorter.
It's never going to be done. I mean, my to-do list is never going to be done. And I think too, we talked a little bit, we were getting a little bit at the end of part 1 into unpredictability and chaos and stuff. And it's funny that I have overall a good, I don't know, I think out of 10, maybe I would say my average feeling of balance is about an 8. So I think that's good. I'm happy with it.
I think that's amazing.
I'm happy with that. I'm not aiming for a 10, but the few times I've hit the 10, what surprised me when I looked back at that and what I've learned from that, it was things had not gone as planned.
Yeah.
Like the 2 times that come to mind where I'm like, to me, my feeling of balance is I am doing exactly the right thing at exactly the right moment. And that it's, and part of it goes back to our conversation too about values and priorities and really being connected with that and knowing. But part of it was my son needed me. So I'm like, well, the rest of my plans are shot.
Course correct.
But based on who I want to be, how I want to show up, what my priorities are, I know exactly what I want to do right now and exactly where I want to be.
Yeah.
And it was such a solid, peaceful feeling that I don't know. That to me is what balance feels like, and why I kind of say, well, grounded is another way I would. So I think I say at the end of the chapter, let me know if you have a totally different idea what you think balance is, and that, you know, I love to learn. So I'm hoping one of the things I'm going to do from this book is get a lot of feedback, but not the whole, this is just a pile of crap feedback, but actually, you know, people, I disagree with you and here's why I disagree with you. I would love conversations like that.
Yeah.
But to me, it's a really, balance is not about controlling your life to make it totally predictable. That to me is not how you get success or control or balance or anything.
Yeah, it's almost like you get the opposite, right? I mean, it's like, you know, they talk about, again, going back to holding balance poses in yoga, like focusing on a spot on the wall, right? So that, like, because when you're looking around at all the things, like you lose your balance, right? Like the fluid in your ears is not staying in equilibrium, and that shift throws your balance off. When you have a stuffy nose or a cold, it's harder to hold your balance because of, you know, the fluid in your ears. And so I love what you're saying too, because what comes for me hearing you talk is balance is connected to resiliency. And because the example that you gave, like you want to be there for your son, and so you have to sort of, you know, shift all these things, and you were in alignment with your values and knew what you wanted. Part of why, like when I think about similar like situations where I felt the most resilient, where I was able to learn, expand, grow, experience what was happening, and to shift that weight, that's when I felt, I'm going to use the word successful. That's when I felt the most balanced. That's when I felt the most successful in terms of my balance, because it was like, okay, like I navigated that situation that was uncomfortable in a way that led me to feeling like I grew from it, or I learned the lesson so I can carry it forward. And so it felt like there was a reason, and this is going to like be like that intellectual part of my brain could come along, because it was like, oh, well, there was a reason that thing happened. It was to learn this lesson, right? We were talking before, you know, failure is always an option. So it's like, yeah, like I learned this lesson, and so that's going to help me get into that balance. That lesson will help me get into that balance more quickly next time. And so by doing that, we build that strength, we build that balance muscle. And I think then, and so to me, there's that piece of resilience. But I think then, when you start looking at that to-do list, it then becomes easier to delegate or dump the things on that to-do list that are actually taking you out of balance. Because when you are in alignment, when you know that you only have X number of hours a day, and that each activity that you're working on is going to take this amount of time, it becomes much easier to say, yeah, this thing is not my priority.
Yeah.
And then you do feel more balanced because there's fewer things on your list, and the things that are on your list are things you actually want to do, right? Or the things that you have to do
that are important.
But yeah, it's like you're not doing those things that you feel like you have to do, or moving in a direction where you feel like, that you should do because somebody else is telling you should do them. They're all in alignment with who you want to be.
And I think it's really, really hard for a lot of us to shift away from what do other people need me to do right now to who do I want to be? Who do I want to show up as? And what does that mean for where should I be right now? And what should I be doing?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we talked before, so not people looking for this conversation probably won't find it, but about really knowing that, and now I just lost it because I was trying to remember what conversation it was in, but talking about the book and taking all the pieces of information, getting a big picture and then bringing it back down so people can really connect with what's going on. One of the benefits, so the paradox of success, what I hope people will get out of the book, the big thing is creating their own personal definition of success. But that sounds very vague. Like, why should people care? But one of the benefits that I think come from that is something I don't even think I've articulated very much before, but what you said just brought it up for me. It's learning to have trust in yourself, right? The steps you have to do, like connecting with your values, looking at your priorities, figuring out what you actually want. All of those things, you need to use those to create this personal definition of success. But how the personal definition of success shows up in your life when you've actually done it is having a deeper sense of trust in yourself. That's what resilience, when you say resilience, and because trust doesn't need to exist if there's no risk, if there's no chance of loss, if there's no danger. Trust is not applicable if there's no danger.
Yeah.
So we're all, especially we talked in the pandemic, we've a lot of us have even more unpredictability now. There's all sorts of stuff about the economy and there's always unpredictability in life, and I think people try to feel safer by trying to control everything.
Yeah.
But another approach is just increasing your trust in yourself to deal with whatever crap happens.
For sure. Yeah, I love, and I think, what comes up for me when you're talking about this idea of trust too, and how for me it ties in even deeper to the balance, is in thinking about the to-do list, is part of it is like, I have to control my time, right? Like, there's only so many hours in the day. And I hear this all the time. Like, I don't have enough time. I say this all the time. Like, I don't have enough time for all these things. Right. And that's part of what we've been trained to do, to like, that tells us that we're out of balance, right? Like, I can't do everything that's on my to-do list. And when you trust that there is enough time, like, nobody has more than 24 hours in a day, right? Like, we're all on the same level playing field in terms of how many hours a day. Some people work faster than others.
And some people need more sleep. I need a lot of sleep to feel well.
Right. So that, like, going back to that balance, exactly. Like, some people need more sleep, some people work faster, some people are more efficient. My husband is super efficient and productive, and like, it's just how his brain works. And when we trust that in ourselves, we have that deep sense of trust, we can also trust that there is enough time to do the things that are important, the things that are priorities, the things that are in alignment with our values. And again, it like brings us back to that balance, because then it becomes like, do I have enough time? Everything that I say yes to on this to-do list means I have to say no to something else, because time is something I can't control. So what am I going to say yes to, and how do I, want to make those decisions? And I do think you started this conversation by talking about like the other words that you use, the sort of that other people use, this idea of being grounded or rooted. I love, again, using the tree yoga. I love the image. I love using the word grounded and rooted because of tree pose. When we talk about like our roots going into the ground, or I talk often about like, the seeds you plant today become the trees tomorrow. And we often have been taught like to be impatient. Like, I'm planting the seed, and I'm thinking about these little kids I have in my yoga class, because we just planted seeds a couple of, and they're like, the seed's not growing, the seed's not growing, the seed. I'm like, we just put the seed in the dirt. Right? Like, and they're 3 to 5 years old, and they're like, when's the seed gonna grow? When's the seed gonna grow? And there is this like excitement that comes because they want the seed to grow so badly. But when they trust that the seed is going to grow, which they all do, because you're telling them, the seed will grow, and here's what you need to do to grow the seed. And we'll water them, and we'll watch them. And we always put in more than one seed, just in case one particular seed doesn't grow. Is that like, when the seed grows, they learn that trust, right? Like, oh, if I put in the time, if I put in the patience, if I like water it, if I do these things that are on my priority list, because this is my goal. This is like my value. My goal is to get this seed to sprout. Then when it grows, like, it's a thing to celebrate. And I'm thinking about your book too, right? Yeah. Like, we've been talking about this book for months, and like, to see it actually here, and like you were saying at the beginning of part 1, like to actually feel the physical weight of it in your hand, like that excitement and that celebration would be very different if like you had a magic wand and you could have just like pulled the information a la Harry Potter out of your brain and like saved it, and like the book was there, right? Like, because you trusted yourself, because you knew that you could achieve it, then it creates a whole different level of celebration. And that doesn't mean that you wouldn't have celebrated if you could have just like taken it out. But again, it comes from that place of trust. It comes from that, like, you'd actually achieve your goals in a very different way when you trust yourself, and you know that you have enough time to get through the steps, and that it's going to happen when it's meant to happen. And you don't need to know all. I remember one of the first conversations we had was like, you're like, I have 15, but I said I can't remember, you said you were going to do 7 or 10 or what it was. Or I can't remember, at some point there was like a different number. Or maybe you were talking about,
because it may subtitle Why Success Sucks and 15 Other Curiosities of Confidence, Happiness, and Healing. I'm like, yeah, I've changed that number a whole bunch of times.
Yeah, right. Like, at some point there, that number was like, is this too many? Is this too little? Like, what should that number be? Like, what, like, and so like, but you just trust it again, like, and the process of like, I'm just going to trust that the book is going to come, and that number is going to come, and I'll know when the number is right. And it might not, like, it might feel right today and wrong tomorrow, but I'm just going to trust it, because you can't know all the things. And I guess that's my point about balance too, is like, part of the wanting to feel control, it actually stops us from taking those steps, because we feel like we need to know all 15 of the steps. And you and I met through Make It Work Online. Jenny, who started that program, used to talk about, when you like cross the river, you just trust that there's another side of the river. You can't always see it if the river is wide enough. And so you take that first step, and that first step is going to show you what the other rocks are that you can step on. But if you stand on the side that you're on and try and map out your plan, you actually like have no idea what the rocks are going to look like because they're too far away. And so you have to take that step, and you have to go for it, and you have to trust that the next step will be there. And that's really difficult and hard.
Well, we talked about failure being an option. We have in our house, somebody makes a mistake. Who makes mistakes? Everyone. And I have this belief in action that taking a wrong step is better than standing still, because you get far more information from taking a step in a wrong direction than you do from standing still and looking 360 degrees around, trying to figure out where you should place your next step. That doesn't give you enough information to me most of the time, right? Yeah. Whereas of course you hope you take a good step. And of course, context matters. Like if somebody's going to get hurt if you fail, or context matters. But in general, like I'm putting out this book. I hope people will buy it. I hope people will read it. I hope I will make enough money that I can write another book and take the time to do that. But it doesn't. I also am seeing it as a learning experience. I've had to learn so much from writing this book and self-publishing it.
Yeah.
That, because I was joking about having 30 book ideas. It's not really a joke. I've got actually, I think about 5 in progress. And I keep bouncing around from one to another. And part of it I realized was, I don't really know once it's done what to do next. Like once the writing is done, quote unquote done, because it's never really done. Yeah. And so I was bumping up against that, and I'm like, oh, shiny, squirrel, shiny new idea. And I finally, I think I finished my first draft, I think at the end of March. And I just decided in January, I am choosing a book. I am focusing on that one book till it's done. And it's going to be hard for me because I'm multi-passionate. I'm a plate spinner, scanner. I like to have multiple things going at the same time. That not having that makes me feel trapped. Having too much stuff on people's to-do list often makes them feel trapped. I'm the opposite. If I only have one project that I'm supposed to be working on, I don't want to work on it. Like it could have been the one I picked because I was the most in love with it at the time. And it's like, I have to do this now. Screw that. I'm going home.
Totally.
So, but I mean, it's having the big picture of what success, and I'm gonna have to, my husband has a meeting soon. I'm gonna have to wrap this up.
I know.
But hopefully we will talk again soon. We're making a plan to talk privately, not necessarily record it. So that's great. But I will give you a chance for, I want you to wrap up with a thought. But I just think when like it made sense for me to write a book. I like writing. I've got practice, although my practice is writing in academia, which people don't want to read. So if you see that I've got the PhD, I do, but I tried to write in a conversational way. So it's actually fun to read. But I've also been asked like, well, if people want to write a book, whatever. I'm like, well, do you want to write a book?
Yeah.
Or do you want to, is your main goal to help people? Like my main goal is with this, honestly, it's a low ticket offer so I can help more people. It's a low ticket offer that somebody buying it and reading it doesn't take from my time.
Right.
So it's a way of helping people that makes sense for me. But for some people that might be starting a podcast, which I hope this podcast also helps people. It could be doing an online course. It could be putting up a blog. Like there's so many different ways. If you actually know what your goals are and we haven't talked about this yet, but I do talk in the book about connecting identifying your passions, connecting with your passions, which is important for bringing joy into your life, but looking at those and actually creating a purpose.
Yeah.
Is what is more like, well, it's another step in creating your personal definition of success. And my purpose isn't writing books.
Right.
My purpose is helping people feel connected to themselves, connected to other people, connected to their purpose, and to actually be living a life they want to live that feels like theirs. You know, and that's my purpose. I can do that in 50 million different ways.
Yeah.
And to see that, to bring that knowledge to yourself. Because somebody could write a book, could take 2 years to write a book and saying, well, that was a waste because I don't like, fine, I've got it, but what's, you know, and that would be tragic.
Yeah. I mean, I know there's so much to say about this, and we can save it for episode 3, but
all right.
part 3. But no, I mean, I think, you know, what you're saying and how it relates this idea of balance to and relates to this idea of trust, is that until you take that action, like you said, until you take that step, you don't know what you're going to learn from it.
Yeah.
So you like doing the things that you love to do, doing the activities that light you up. What it also helps you get through that fear, right? It helps you get through that because it's going to give you energy. It's going to make you excited. It's going to be like, you know, detached from the outcome of will people buy this book because, you know, or will people listen to the podcast, or will people come to, you know, my TED Talk or whatever, right? Like it whatever it is that people are putting out there. When it's something that lights you up, the energy that you put into it is infectious and magnetic, and people feel that energy because we do share energy with one another. We share, our nervous systems talk to each other. And I think you and I talked about this on one of the earlier podcasts from last year. So to tie a bow on all of this, right? I mean, I think this all comes down to, like you said, who do you want to be and who were you meant to be and how do you want to serve, whether you're serving clients or your family or, you know, whoever you are serving, because we're all serving people or our communities. It all boils down to being grounded, trusting yourself. And a lot of us didn't learn how to do that or didn't have models of how to do that. And so it's a relearning process. And so giving yourself the grace and compassion, which you and I talked about earlier, like before we got on, like having to give yourself, you know, having the compassion and the grace for yourself when things don't feel comfortable. Because if you go through this book, there are questions that are not comfortable, or there are,
but it works.
It works, right? Because when you get, and it's not because what you are doing is relearning who you are.
And the comfortable parts are usually not what you need. That's why they're comfortable.
Yeah. And that's why there are people, you know, like you and I and a whole bunch of, you know, other amazing coaches and communities that help support people on the journey of moving through the discomfort, because it is like, I truly don't believe we're meant to do any of this alone. Right. I believe to my core, to my soul, that we're all connected, that we're all puzzle pieces, you know, in this grand jigsaw puzzle of humanity, not just within this, you know, within this life, but with like our ancestors and our descendants. And so part of that is recognizing that, you know, there is a tribe out there for you that can help support you when you feel out of balance. And it's a natural part of the process to feel out of
yes, it is. And it's a natural, I'm sorry, my husband's actually yelling at me that I've got to go. But I do hope as well that one of the things people will get out of the book And the fact that I refer to some podcast episodes in there is to not feel alone. Because I remember one of the worst things was feeling like I was somehow broken. Everyone else was okay, but I was broken. And there was something wrong with me. So yes, totally agreed. Thank you very much. I could talk for another 5 hours. So thank you. We'll have to have you back soon.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye.